Oftentimes we wonder why God doesn't allow things to work out. Oftentimes we ask and sit there and ask ourselves many questions, and we oftentimes start doubting ourselves, right? When things don't go through and fall through in our lives, we start losing it. We end up being stressed. We end up overthinking it. We end up not wanting to pursue it any longer. But there is a reason why things do not work out in your favor sometimes. Whether that's a job interview, right? And you've applied to this job many times and it doesn't work out. Whether it's a business that you created that, didn't go through the way and pan out the way you wanted it to. Maybe an idea you had for your job that just, hit straight flat mats, right? Hit the ground and never took off, right? Maybe even a school you applied to that you're trying to get into and they keep denying you, and they said your GPA wasn't high enough. They say your SAT score wasn't high enough, ACT score wasn't high enough, that you just don't qualify. And you know what? That is absolutely okay. That's absolutely okay. Jesus went through the same thing, right? We've all been there. When we deal with situations that don't go our way, right? We deal with this stuff on a regular day basis. Whether it's planning a date with a person and it doesn't fall through, or even applying for your job, having perfect interviews and still being denied. That's happened to me before. I've had one time I applied to this one job, 3 different times, had amazing interviews every single time. I had the qualifications for the job, still wasn't granted the job, right? But see, here's the thing. This will cause you to be stressed, right? That's valid. You'll be stressed because you don't have anywhere else to look to, right? When you are stressed, you are depressed, right? Therefore, you cannot compress, right? You cannot relieve. You cannot feel relief. You cannot relieve yourself of your feelings, right? And ultimately, you give up on pursuing it. We know that we have to accept the reality that not everything will go our way, right? Not everything will go your way. You cannot control everything, right? Situations are out of your control, right? Human beings think different ways. They have different, thoughts, different feelings. It's a bunch of different judgmentals, especially on the job interview side. Though that may seem like a bad thing, it could really be a good thing, right? God could be trying to show you something. He could be trying to teach you a lesson. He could be showing you something better. But see, let's get into scriptures a little bit, right? Jesus had faced unwanted circumstances, right? So in Matthew chapter 26, verse 37, it reads, So in this, Jesus had expressed towards James and John, who were Peter and Zebedee's sons, right? And he was actually at this time, I believe Jesus went to Mount Olive in Gethsemane, and he wanted to go there and pray. We know if you read that part of Matthew, that was closer to where he was being betrayed, right? And he got denied by Peter. He was getting denied. Jesus knew, but Peter tried to play it off like he wasn't going to deny Jesus 3 times, right? He kept falling asleep, right? Every time Jesus prayed, when Jesus asked him, hey, sit here and wait and pray with me and be patient with me. But they kept falling asleep. His disciples kept falling asleep. But let's read that he was he described himself as anguished and distressed. And in verse 38, that my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death, right? He described himself as, he said, stay here and watch with me, right? This is something he asked of Peter and his disciples. But what did Peter and his disciples do? They went off and fell asleep, right? Verse 39 says, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine, right? Let me move this a little bit. So the suffering that Jesus was feeling at the time, he didn't want to feel any longer, but he didn't care necessarily about the suffering. He cared about doing God's will. See, this is the thing with us. Sometimes we are going through things don't happen, and we want to make them work out so bad when they're not even in the plans that God has already laid out. Sometimes we want to take over, right? When you get drunk and you have that hangover, right? You need to hang over and be still and let God work. I think y'all are not hearing me. Jesus is saying, Father, this really isn't turning out the way I want it to anymore. But it's not about what I want, feel, or think, but about what you want and think and feel and desire for my life. See, that is the difference between our understanding and God's understanding of our lives, right? We see our lives one way, but God's way is the only way because he knows us better than anyone else. Just like you hear people say, oh yeah, you know yourself better than anyone else. No, God knows us better than we know ourselves. Believe it or not. Let me keep reading. So stop thinking about what you want all the time. It is not always about what you desire in your heart. It's not always about what you want. Have you ever been in a situation to where you wanted, let's say you wanted to get some food, right? But you realized your bank account was low, right? But you realized you had to take care of another payment. And therefore you can't get or eat out today. But you got groceries at the crib. But you want to eat out so bad. You want to do what you want to do. Now you go get food, right? You enjoyed the food. It was good. It was scrumptious, whatever the case may be. And now you can't take care of a payment because you don't get paid for like another week, right? See, that's the thing. You desire to eat, but really your heart should have told you should have listened to your heart that was telling you that you had to take care of this payment, right? Because this payment is super important, whether it's a mortgage payment, right? Let's say it's a mortgage payment. You can't take care of your mortgage payment, right? That means you're killing your credit, right? Or an apartment, right? You're killing your credit. You can't pay off your monthly apartment, bill, right? Think about that. Right? Sometimes you're going to have to look inside yourself, inside your heart. And then sometimes if God is giving you that proceeding, then listen to that hearing, right? God will sometimes use situations to get us back on track, right? Think of a guy like let's think about Jonah, right? Who was swallowed by a big fish, right? Because he kept running from God, he was so, it was more so a disrespectful type of fearful, right? He was more so scared, not more so humble and respectful of God, but he was scared. He ran from God, put him in a big fish. But guess what? Now he's back with Christ. Now think about that. Think about if God would have thrown you in a big fish, the big fish went underneath the ocean, right? You were in a big fish and you had no clue of what was going to happen to you. Right? But you had nowhere to go in the first place. So it's going to cause you to have to turn to something. That's going to cause you to turn to Christ, right? It's going to turn you to have to actually listen to God, right? God uses situations to get us back on track into his blessing and calling for our lives, right? God will make things not work so he can refocus your mind on him, right? When you're pursuing, especially my people who are single like me, something I had to realize was if I'm pursuing a person, God has to be the forefront. Now, what happened to me is I would pursue a girl or pursue, pursue a person. And oftentimes, that would be my full focus, right? Therefore, I can't be focused on my purpose. I can't be focused on my goals. I can't be focused on my aspirations. I can't be focused on what God has for me, right? If you make that a priority, then that takes priority over everything else. Therefore, that priority is in the front of your mind. Right? That means everything else is behind you, and that doesn't matter, right? Because we don't look backwards, we look forwards. So therefore, if that is what you're focused on, you won't focus on anything else. What am I trying to tell you? Think about when God, right, allows your plans to get delayed, right, and not proceed. It's because he has something better, and he wants you to trust him more than yourself, right? Trust him more than yourself. Quit putting trust in only yourself. You have to be confident and trust in your abilities, but you can't trust only on your flesh, right? Trust in God, right? Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called to his purpose. For those who love God, right? All things will work together for good, right? Things that you want to work out will work out for the better. One, if you love God. But most importantly, if they're a part of his plan and his purpose. What am I trying to tell you in this video? Just as Paul was left for blind, he was drawn back to God, right? Just as Adam and Eve did, they did what they did, they ended up having to be drawn back to Christ. Though they were tempted, though Jesus was tempted in the forest, he stayed on the path of righteousness. He stayed with the Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit was already within him. He's Jesus Christ. But I'm saying, look, he was already with God. And because he was already drawn with God, he was so focused on what God desired of him that Satan couldn't touch him. See, we have to get out of our own heads with this, right? If something isn't going to work out, it isn't meant to work out. It is all in God's timing that it will work out, right? God has a better plan. God has a better purpose. He has a better purpose. Thank you for watching. As always, God bless.